So today I wanted to address some of the problems that I noticed a lot of people, including myself, have with the final villains in Bleach. Now, by final, I'm specifically talking about the final Sternritter, the elites, so to speak, that Yhwach had in the back burner so that he could ultimately attack with these and have them do his bidding. Now, if I'm correct, the remaining ones are Askin, we had Pernita, the hand or whatever. We also have the Miracle, the Thor guy, Hawkman, whatever you want to call him, and the X-Axis, if I'm correct. Maybe there's more, whatever. But I know aside from Hoshwald and Yhwach, these were the fighters that we ultimately had. And in comparison to some of the other ones, one of the things I think that makes it a little bit more lackluster opposed to the fights that we had with some of the other ones is that there's not much really build up for these guys because it came at the very end. If you look at some of the other ones, and I really wish it would have been the case, I think some of the other Sternritters that we've seen earlier on should have been the elites, and maybe some of the crusties like Pepe or whatever should have been burnt off. Yeah, of course, kill some of these motherfuckers off. They definitely should have been killed off one by one, but I think we had some very interesting ones that shouldn't have been dusted off early on and should have been the elites opposed to these guys. I mean, be honest with me. Tell me it wouldn't have been sick if Asnod, Kongdu, Bazby, Bombietta, and all those crazy bitches, the zombie girl, the mighty bitch, all of them all together. Hell, even Kurge. Kurge was pretty awesome in the beginning of this whole war or whatnot. I mean, to be honest with you, as much shit as I gave Gremmy, I think even Gremmy, if he was done right and wasn't in a mismatch and wasn't stupid enough to blow himself up in a sense because he couldn't imagine how powerful Kenpachi was and the body couldn't handle it. Like, even Gremmy to an extent should have been a part of this big elite thing with, all of the Sternritter or whatever. Like, I think that group should have been the elites, and these people should have been maybe people that were dusted off earlier on. I mean, Pernita, it kind of was interesting in a sense because he was one of the Soul King's limbs. So in that aspect, it's like, oh shit, we fought Soul King limb, but again, it was a hand. It was a hand that didn't really have too much knowledge, although it kind of got a little bit smarter as it kept going. But in reality, if you compare Pernita and the interesting aspects of him and the cool aspects of him and everything about him in comparison to somebody like Asnod, like I remember Asnod when that motherfucker was introduced, like that's how you prove the epicness of a character. Like Byakuya, down, sick character design, pretty cool backstory at the end as well, like something pretty decent. You compare that to like a hand or the X-Axis or the Miracle that we don't really know too much about. Like I think there was more setup and build up for those guys, and that's why I feel as though if anything they should have been the end, because right now we have these guys and then we also have Yhwach and Hoshwald. Like those are the main ones, and I think we exclude Yhwach and Hoshwald because I still have a lot of hope for them. I'm still hyped for them as a motherfucker, getting a little bit more interesting as far as what we found out about Hoshwald's relationship with Bazby and where he started to where he's ultimately at now, and some of the power swaps with him and Yhwach. Like there's still a lot of hope and hype for them, especially Yhwach. I mean, at the end of the day, whatever you want to say about him, maybe he's not doing enough or whatever the case may be, but he's gotten things done throughout this arc. As a villain, Yhwach, which I'm kind of getting into like a Yhwach discussion here, but like as a villain, he's accomplished shit. He got rid of Captain Commander Yamamoto, killed the motherfucker, like he destroyed the Serite, he took over, fucking took the Soul King down and got his powers, so you can't really deny the epicness of Yhwach in a sense of he's accomplished some shit, and Hoshwald still have hype for him, but those are really the only two out of everybody that's left that is hype. And if we would have had Bombietta's crazy ass, don't get me wrong, I still say one of my favorite and I think one of the best fights in this entire war was Bombietta versus Komamura. What happened with Komamura and everything, like I never thought in a million years that I would have been that hype. I thought Komamura's fight was fucking amazing. I really enjoyed it and I thought it was done very well, and just the repercussions that he had to suffer in the end was crazy. But wouldn't that have been a little bit more epic as one of the final fights, maybe Komamura with maybe the aid of somebody else as one of the final, elites? I think that would have been sick, and at the same time it also would have built up exactly how legendary Komamura's group is. But instead right now what we left with is these guys. Like I would say out of the four that I just mentioned or whatever, again, Askin, the Miracle, X-Axis, and Pernita, he was the Soul King's limb, so there was some interest in there, so it's kind of like, okay, that's kind of relevant or whatever. Askin, he's kind of like a troll. I'm not too fond of him because he's just kind of like a troll, but you can't disregard the fact that he took out Grimjow seemingly or whatever, but he's not really all that hype. He's not really like big baddie. And then the X-Axis right now in his fight, I mean, granted, you can argue that he's, going up against one of the most legendary Bankais right now, and it took this legendary Bankai to take him down, but there's still no interesting factors about him. We didn't really know too much about him, and I think that's one of the biggest mistakes about these people is that with Pernita, it got a little bit interesting because we found out, that he's part of the Soul King or whatever. We still don't really know exactly what was he doing there, how did it all happen, but at least there was something there. But I think if Kubo would have explained these characters a little bit more, set them up a little bit better, I think his biggest setup was like, oh shit, because Yhwach helped them or whatever, they took down the elites. So that was what he was trying to do to build them up, but I don't think that that was as interesting or enough as how I felt and how a lot of people felt for people like Bombietta, for people like Kongdu, Bazby. Like those people, we were fucking hyped, and if really felt legit, like the hype was real. These people, maybe the Miracle, like as much shit as I give the Miracle, whatever, we don't really know the extent of what he can do and his backstory, so maybe there's some hope for him as well. But yeah, that's my stance on the final villains that's right now in the problems. I think the biggest problem, the glaring problem, is that some of the people before these guys were more interesting, looked sicker, were more vile, and had better setup than these guys. And that's where I feel as though the problem is right now, why a lot of people are saying like some of these fights are stale or not that interesting. Like Kyoraku's fight right now, the reason why it's interesting is because of Kyoraku, his Bankai, and how much of an awesome character Kyoraku is. It's not that the X-axis is in particular anything hype. Like people were going crazy like, what the fuck is with his design when he went into his holy form? So nobody's really like, yeah, it's the X-axis that's bringing it in. Yeah. It's Kyoraku. And while Pranita had a little bit of hype to him, ultimately you gotta think to yourself, wait a minute, it's a hand. And it was mainly hype because of his status of being a part of the Soul King, but it was more so everything that was doing with Mayuri and his daughter. That was the interesting part about that as well. But when you go back to some of those other fights, Bombietta's cruelty and how sick she was and how much carnage she was doing against Komamura, that was hype. Asnod, what he had done to Byakuya, and then the scary nature of him and his backstory, and Rukia overcoming the odds and everything, that was hype. And it was those villains that, it wasn't only Rukia's epicness, it was also Asnod's that brought something to the table. Likewise with Bombietta and Komamura's fight, it was both of them. But with these fights, it's kind of like Kyoraku's the man, Mayuri's crazy and nuts, but the villains aren't bringing as much to the table, and they should be built up a little bit better. That's all I'm saying. Let me know what you guys think. How do you feel about the elites right now? What do you think, if there's any problems at all, which I personally think, and a lot of people as well, that there are some problems? What do you think it is with these elites opposed to some of the earlier Sternritter that we had? Why the earlier Sternritter to an extent seemed a little bit more interesting and people were more hyped about those fights opposed to these guys? Is there something other than what I mentioned that is wrong with these people? Why people just don't really care about them as much as Asnod, Bombietta, Basby, Kongdu? And your overall thoughts of this? Just kind of wanted to dish out a little bit of Bleach here or there and talk about some of the problems with the villains right now. I mean, I'm still hoping for Horsewall, still hoping for your watch, and who knows? I mean, one of my friends came up with a crazy theory that maybe your watch in the end might revive the old Gotei 13, which would be a legendary final battle. Not to mention, of course, when Aizen gets in the war, because everybody knows Aizen for the motherfucking win, baby. We don't even know if he's going to be the final villain, and I can't wait. But that's all I have for this one. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you liked anything I had to say or enjoyed the video, drop me a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed, if you could do so as well, that'd be amazing. I'm ForneverWorld, and as always, people, have an awesome day. Just imagine when Aizen says that word, Bankai.